Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Common Good Data Podcast. My name is Drew Reynolds. Today, we are going to have a great conversation on mixed methods evaluation. I think in evaluation, we talk a lot about the quantitative side of things. We certainly have an emphasis there around, outputs and outcomes and KPIs and numbers. But we also recognize the importance of storytelling in nonprofit practice in particular, but across the social sector. And mixed methods takes an approach that says, hey, we can bring these two things together in our work and our evaluation and really try to find ways in which storytelling and data can be woven together to complete a more robust narrative of an entire picture, really, of what you're trying to look at or evaluate. And to do that, we've brought on an amazing expert, Cheralynn Corsack, who is the founder and principal at Local Insight Studio, is going to join us today to talk about approaches to mixed methods work and to do so in the context of rural communities. So very excited about our conversation with Cheralynn today. We also, I do want to bring to your attention that we have a couple things coming down the pike here from Common Good Data. First, you can check out online. We have our online course, Break the Starvation Cycle, which you can access at commongooddata.com/courses. It's a free online course. I think it's a really great way to get a sense of how you might think about data and evaluation work kind of across your organization, across the life cycle. It's a great course that I hope will be useful for you. So check it out at commongooddata.com/courses. And of course, as you're listening to this episode, we want to be able to extend this reach to help as many people who are interested in data and evaluation topics. So if you can like us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We now have a video on our Spotify, which is super cool too. So check us out on all those places, and please like and subscribe and share with a friend. So very excited to share this episode with you, and we'll dive right into it. Mixed methods work in rural communities with Cheralynn Corsack. Cheralynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So glad you could be here today to talk a little bit about evaluation. I appreciated the chance to get to know you and other people who are doing great evaluation work in the field. So thrilled to have you on board. And you run an organization called Local Insight Studio. So tell us about Local Insight Studio.
I do. So we are based here in Atlanta, myself and then my colleague Naya. We are our two staff members, and we work with nonprofits and foundations, and then also philanthropy serving organizations to help them evaluate their work. So that includes measuring, what folks are doing and the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve as a result of what they're doing. And then also a huge focus on communication. So how are we taking that data and then doing something with it? So how are we bringing it back to communities, funders, grantees, program participants, all different types of ways that we can bring data back, and they're able to easily read and engage with that data so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, kind of just making it a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, I love that, circling it back and bringing it back to communities. Sometimes we spend so much time in evaluation just thinking about all the technical things you have to do to be able to collect and then report on data, and then it just sits there. And it's like, hey, no, the whole reason we did this was to actually make decisions, to share information with people, to drive impact in some kind of way. So excited to talk more about that in detail and as our episode continues. I think a lot of evaluation work happens in urban and suburban places. And it's not by and large always the case, but it just, there seems to be a bit of a bias that direction. And that's just where people live. That's part of the nature of how it works. But you have an emphasis, and I think an expertise in working with rural communities. So can you talk a little bit about your work in rural communities, and maybe for people who are new to evaluation or who are stepping in for the first time, what should they know about rural context before doing evaluation work there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like evaluation, it does happen a lot in more urban and suburban areas, and because a lot of people live there. And then also a lot of evaluators are trained in those areas. When you think about like universities or colleges or anything where evaluation would come out of, a lot of times they are closer to metro areas. So I think it kind of like it almost breeds itself in a way. It just creates that over time. And then there's also, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, if there isn't an evaluator in a rural community, we have to go to someone who's in a city, to be able to evaluate that type of work. And that's why we like to use a lot of participatory methods in the evaluation that we're doing. So how can we make sure that folks in rural communities have more of a say in the type of data that they're collecting and how they're using that data and who has access to it. And so I think that that is a good way for us. Like I was born and raised in rural New Hampshire, and so I come from a rural community, but have spent a lot of my adult life in and around metro areas just as a result of if you wanted to do something outside of what was in that community, what was offered, which is, mainly like school system work or healthcare. So if you wanted to go outside of it, you had to be able to access areas that were outside of your rural community. And at the same time, I'm now bringing work back into there. We have clients in New Hampshire, but then also in rural areas all up and down the East Coast. And so when we're doing that work, I feel like I end up thinking about, okay, what was life like in a community when I was living in a rural area? What was that like? And with the understanding that I'm only from one small town, right? Rural is different across the whole US, but I think we can use a lot of the same principles in what folks would hope. And I honestly don't think they're that different from like what urban folks hope to do. They hope to have a say in what happens both in the programs that they're in, but then also in like where data is being shared and how it's being used. They want to be able to influence things becoming better in that program or funding working more efficiently in that area. And so I think participatory principles are a way to do that in both contexts. And at the same time, it's really fun to do it in rural communities because everything is so connected. And it's connected in a way that feels a lot more explicit than maybe in urban or suburban areas. When you're in a rural community, one thing becoming like lifting up or something, whether that's youth development or something that's going on with the school district or the way farmers are supported, all of these things so closely influence everything else in the community because it's so tight knit. And the connections that folks have with one another are, they go beyond just their work. It's like them just seeing each other on a consistent and constant basis in so many different instances, and that actually is a huge that helps movements or programmatic changes just kind of go a little bit like more easily because you're having all of these touch points with folks on a much more common basis. It's not like, oh, we're meeting about this specific thing. It's like, no, I saw you getting a sandwich at the deli and we talked a little bit about this thing. And so now I'm going to talk to this other person. And so I think just understanding that influencing one aspect of rural life is going to have an influence on all of the other aspects of it, which is a really cool opportunity to say, okay, if we have a funder that's interested in, I'm trying to think of like an example, but like let's say they're interested in mental health in that area. And there's a lot of different facets with which that could show up. It can show up in the schools. It can show up it just by, influencing student mental health. It can show up in just the actual providers in the area, and then the connections with those. But that's going to have an influence on all of these other aspects of life so much closer to the fact than it taking forever for it to influence these other areas. So I think that's one of the things that I find to be really fun about working within rural context is that a lot of it is based on relationship building, the networks that you have, and this like collective hope and desire for something. And if you can find what that collective hope and desire for something is and identify like what that community is really good at versus what they're struggling with, and then there's a common understanding of that, all these different organizations can more easily, they're already connected. They're already working in the same areas. They already get their groceries at the same place. They already have school children all in the same school district. And so it's a little bit easier to just gather towards a collective goal and move in that way.
Yeah, I love kind of your description of it. And it reminds me of a story. I lived in a rural small town for a couple years teaching high school in Mississippi. And I remember when I moved to the community for the first time, I went to the bank to, just get a bank account set up and get a credit card. And I sit down across from the banker and they looked at my address and they said, "Oh yeah." And they knew my landlord and like that, all that sort of different connections. And they also knew people at the school that I was going to be teaching at. And they're
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you got a new, Spanish teacher there." I was teaching Spanish at the time. So you find that really resonates the way you talked about how like, oh, like your conversation at a bank or at a grocery store and at a place where you're working are all interconnected and those same people see each other all the time. But it provides these unique opportunities because people see each other all the time, that it's the same kind of conversations. It makes it easier to have those informal conversations. I'm curious, you mentioned participatory methods
Yeah.
and the importance of kind of using those methods and approaches to ensure that role of voice is are kind of at the forefront of your evaluation. Can you talk a little bit about maybe an example of how you've done that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see here. So we're working with a program that is, and this is not in a rural context. We do a lot of, but the one
Mhm.
that's top of my mind right now is called Partnership for Reentry Program. And so they support folks who are newly on parole to gain employment, housing, kind of reestablish social relationships, just really get to a stable place. And through that, we had folks who'd been in the program for quite a long period of time. And we wanted to do some interviews with folks who had been in that program. And we just really were not the best people to do those interviews. Their entire staff is fully formally incarcerated, with many of them being former lifers. And they are already really good at having conversations with folks and listening and offering support and affirming and validating what folks are saying. That is literally what they do in those roles. And so at the same time, we didn't really want the program director or people who are working super close with them to do those interviews either, because just the bias that comes into play.
Mhm.
But that's where we ended up training a couple of their staff who worked on a different program, but still had those same skills to conduct those interviews. And so we did a whole interview training with them. So going over best practices and converting questions from close-ended to open-ended and how to ask follow-ups. And then also like what kinds of things are they wondering about? And so it transitioned into us co-creating a data collection tool, an interview protocol. We did the training, and then they conducted interviews. We listened to recordings just to hear how things were going. We checked in at the halfway point, and then we started to co-analyze that data. And so they didn't do coding in terms of using like a statistical analysis software, but we still used a grounded theory approach and were able to code those, kind of like identify the emerging themes that were coming up to help us as the evaluators get a really good start at, okay, what is coming up for these folks? And they identify things that we would not have caught, because we know that they have been in those exact same situations as the folks that they were interviewing. And so they just had a perspective on it and a gauge on the types of words they were using or the sentiment that was coming through in the way they said something, like interviewee said something. And so it was really cool to co-analyze that data with them and then bring those findings back to the whole team.
I love that term that you described it as a co-developing this process.
Yeah.
And I think that, for the nonprofit leaders who are listening now or social sector leaders, I think sometimes we have this conception that you kind of want to outsource this or that you need to have this objective third party to always do evaluation work. And there's a time and place for that. But a
Mhm.
lot of times, if you can work collaboratively with an evaluator, whether that's internal or external to your organization, it gives you a chance to really do, I think, some of the best work because you're not the person who's coming in and bringing their evaluation expertise. It really gets a good understanding of what your organization is all about, but that you're also including the voice of your staff and in your organization, making sure that's included in guiding the evaluation. I love this co-creation kind of idea and concept, and hope that others can kind of continue to take that insight with them from this episode. You
Yeah.
know, we talk about quantitative and qualitative evaluation a lot, and you'll hear that term used a lot in the field for sure. And then this term mixed methods, where we kind of say, hey, let's bring a little bit of the best of both of these things together to try and tell a more complete story. So, can you talk a little bit about what mixed methods approaches are, and then how you've seen, or maybe some examples where you know you have been able to reveal insights with both of those together that you would have missed otherwise had they not been together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, mixed methods approach is basically just saying we want to pair quantitative, which is what we traditionally think of as data. So, those numbers, so that might be a survey response. If you have 100 people respond to a survey, 50% said strongly agree to something, then you have, 50% of respondents said this. And then we want to pair that with stories, which is the qualitative data. And these naturally come up in just anecdotes, conversations that people have with others. A lot of like smaller, newer nonprofits come to me and say, well, I feel like I already kind of know what people think. Like, because I have conversations with folks all the time about this, that, and the other. And so that's a form of qualitative data that I think can go on, that can kind of be underrated or seen as like not as real or not as rigorous. And there is a way to like amp up the rigorness. And I think that's what evaluators can help nonprofits do is say, okay, yes, you are already having all of these amazing conversations with folks. Let's add in a consistent kind of set of questions. Let's maybe not, let's take it away from the program director and have someone else asking these questions. Let's do some training on interview best practices. And then we can easily transition from I have a few anecdotes to I actually talked to 20 people and asked consistently the same questions. And these were the themes that came up from that. What was the second half of the question?
The part where, how did you, or maybe an example where you have the qualitative piece inform the data, the quantitative piece, in maybe a way that wouldn't have happened if they weren't done together.
Yeah. Um, that is a great question. I feel like that happens all the time. We don't really ever just do quantitative,
Mhm.
truly. We'll have surveys, or other forms of data, but we're always pairing it with some sort of qualitative aspect, interviews, focus groups, journey mapping sessions. Um, I mean, I think a great example of that is some parent surveys that we were doing, parent student surveys, but I want to talk about the parent surveys specifically. Um, one, just surveys, we get really difficult response rates overall. That has been an issue, I think, since ever, and
Yeah,
has been
yeah, yeah.
particularly difficult post COVID. So, with that, I always am like, okay, we only heard from people who wanted to do the survey. So that's just one aspect of it. And at the same time, you can gain an understanding of folks across the board. But like when we're working with particular parent focus groups, I'm thinking about a program that was working with offering mental health and counseling to students in a school. And so we did a parent survey, but then we also did focus groups with parents whose children had been in counseling. The survey was just high level. Like people don't get into it. They just answer some data and okay, yes, across the board, parents felt like their students were getting better, like that their students' mental health was more stable at the end of the year, or that they were a big thing that came out of it was just more communicative about their emotions, right? They were better able to share with their parents how they were feeling, just that communication. But then you do the parent focus groups and you're hearing about these specific stories about how students actually taught their parents how to communicate better about their emotions because their students were doing it. And the students were bringing home examples and little worksheets that were helping them practice. And parents were helping their students with those worksheets, which then helped parents be able to better communicate about things with their students. And so it ends up it's so much more than just, oh, students can communicate their feelings better. It you truly get to better understand the actual impact of the program. And yeah, maybe only 5 parents kind of shared that sentiment. And so we have the survey that has a lot more people participating in it. And then you have focus groups where that theme came up among, a few different parents. But in a focus group, parents can kind of bounce off of each other and agree with one another. And there are the nods and the like, I understand, and the, ooh, I should try that. I should pay more attention to the homework. Um, like all of these other things that come out of it beyond just evaluation work, but in the form of parents actually understanding and seeing what other parents' experiences are and resonating with them or not resonating with them, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Oh, what a great example. And I love interviews and focus scopes for that same purpose because it really just gets the sort of depth of information that you just simply can't get from the surveys. And it's really cool to see it. Um, one thing that I'm kind of been interested in too is, I know we've kind of talked a lot about rural pieces, even though have lots of examples, but maybe just along the topic of underrepresentation in research and data. And when I've done research in rural communities, and maybe in a more urban or suburban context, there's more research availability. There's more universities or nonprofits or more well-resourced county health departments that are able to provide great research and data about that particular community. And then you go to a rural community, and it's like you can't find data on anything sometimes. And that's not to be dismissive of rural communities. It's just the reality of what it means to be living in the rural community sometimes. And so I'm thinking about like how you've been thinking about that representation in data on with rural communities and kind of how that informs your work a little bit.
Yeah. A lot of times it's just because of the number of people living in an area, right? Or you have a number for a county, but the county is miles and miles and miles, and there's not that many people in it. And so you're like, okay, well, if we're looking at transportation, or access to services, mental health or substance use services or anything like that, access is going to be very different from someone who lives closer to the downtown than someone who lives at the other side of the county.
Yeah.
Like completely different. And so I think then if you're looking at you're looking at data that's coming through about that, you have to have that context. And so I think a lot of that just comes with actually taking time to understand the people in that area and where they're coming from and where they're living and why they're living there. And I don't mean why in terms of like a lot of times it's like family land and
Yeah.
that's why they're not. So I think just understanding more about where they're coming from and what they're doing on a daily basis and all the types of things that they've tried. Like, for example, there are services for medical appointments where it says, okay, if you have a medical appointment, we're going to send you this car or this bus, and it will bring you to and from your appointments. It's the same thing for outpatient treatment for substance use, um, for other therapies, things like that. Which, like, you think about it, and you're like, that sounds great. It sounds like something that it would work, right? Except when the buses are late, or they're way too early, or they pick up way too late. And so what was an hour appointment turns into a 4 or 5 hour day of where you're sitting around waiting for this bus to pick you up, or you're missing appointments, or you have to arrive X amount of hours early. And then the the issues with that is, okay, what about work now? Because now you can't be working on the day that you have an appointment. But you're not allowed to have multiple appointments on the same day per for some of like the insurances that are going on. So it just turns into this whole like when you look at a number for a county, you can look at that number, but it's not until you talk to people and you actually understand all of the decisions and the hoops and everything that they have to think about and go through to get treatment for something in a day or a week and how that influences like their kids' pickup schedule and other like events and work and all these different things that you're truly understanding the difference between a rural county and the folks who are living closer to the center to where like the downtown is or where services are versus those who are not as close to downtown or where services are.
Yeah, it's a good example of that kind of disparity even you see within a rural or a county setting, something like that.
Yeah.
Great example. To kind of come to our last question here, maybe can you talk a little bit? At the beginning of the episode, you talked about making sure that we translate some of that information into information and data that communities can use.
Yeah.
So, what are some strategies or tools or ways you thought about taking evaluation data, which can sometimes be a little bit jargony and researchy, and make it useful for people to make decisions and share about their work?
Yeah. I want to talk about two things. I think one is just the words that we're using. So we'll come back to that. And then the other is how we're framing the words that we're using. I think a lot of times among so many different types of populations, it is a very deficit-based narrative.
Mm.
They don't have access to transportation. They don't have these mental health supports. They don't have this. They don't have that. And it and yet we need to take more time as evaluators to figure out what they do have. And because rural communities are the tight-knitness that they can have, the vibrancy that comes from the relationships and these general like easy forms of where folks are coming into contact with one another and making things happen just because they want to make things happen. I had a conversation the other day with someone, and I had never realized this, but and it was someone who had also spent a lot of time in New Hampshire. Um, I always felt like I had a say in what went on in my community. And I was more of an outspoken. I had a lot going on that I felt I had a lot of feelings about how a lot of things were happening in my community. And I always knew how to get them out. I knew how to get them in the paper. I knew how to get them to my principal, my vice principal. I knew how to get them to my teachers, how to get them to all of the organizations that were around that I was coming into contact with. Um, and someone from a different small town said, "That's crazy. I never felt like that." And he was like, "I don't know if it was just because I just didn't have that, like, I just didn't have that desire or that want, but that feeling is something I have never felt in an urban area of where I can
Mm.
just walk out and influence what the heck happens." Like,
Right.
like you can influence your own like engagement with others and like how you're participating in the world, and but in terms of like actual structural or like policies or rules or things that happened or how things were done, I just didn't have we just don't have that agency when there's so many people. And I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing, but I think it's a really cool feeling that a lot of folks in rural communities can actually feel like they have an influence on what happens around them in a way that is bigger than themselves. And that is an incredible asset to to help uplift. And so if we have as evaluators can help folks hear what other folks are saying in their community through data to then influence something, that's like is a really cool feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's where a lot of sharing data back comes from is wanting to spark that or to be a supporter of that because so many communities already have it or someone has it, but it needs to spread into some other areas. And so how can we push that forward? And and then I also think that that starts from buy-in before you're even like evaluating or collecting data. Like we are outsiders coming into this community, even rural communities that have been working in for 3, 4 years, like we're still outsiders to what is going on there. And so there has to be a process with which you build relationships and have trust and gain trust with one another. And at the same time, still 3, 4 years later, we're still outsiders. We don't live there. And so I think the more that we can build up folks in those communities to be active collaborators in evaluation, the closer we can get to like sticking true with what data folks actually need in that community and how they want to use that data to improve it. The second one that I talked about was just the words that we're using. My family is a full family of entrepreneurs, and none of which have gone to college. So everything I do, and I did go to college, everything I do, I have to translate when I go home, what I'm working on or what I'm doing. And so that is just in my vocabulary. Like there's just a different set of terminology that's used among folks who have gone to college or have a formal training in something. And that's not to say my family doesn't have formal training and stuff. It's just a little different, right? It's like workforce training, just like being in that but not in an education college state. And so I'm constantly trying to check myself and think about how am I making sure that what I'm bringing back is accessible to the people who I want to read it. If the folks who I want to read it can't understand what's happening, there's no point in like putting it out. We have to change it. We have to try something different and run it by folks in those communities to figure out what wording does actually resonate with them and is easy for them to take in and read because it sucks when things are hard to understand. Like that's not fun for anyone. And so I don't want to do that for anyone, regardless if they're rural or urban or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you the use of language, I think, is one I haven't. I always kind of think of in that when I think of answers to that question of like different presentation modes, the different people to reach out to, but I think paying particular attention to the specific words that you use and how that is going to land or not with kind of a particular community, I think is super really interesting. So thank you so much for sharing about that.
Sure.
We come to the end of our podcast, and my colleague Roger's not here today, but he would be like, "You can't miss this question, Drew." And we always have some fun, goofy question about 80s or 90s culture at the very end of a movie. Or sorry, I said movie. I gave away the punchline here. I was wondering if you can think of a movie from the 80s or 90s that is set in a rural community that you remember or appreciate or maybe saw growing up or whatever. And we
Yeah.
can extend the timelines too. So if you want to go back into the 70s a little bit or a little into the 2000s, that's okay. But just getting a little bit nostalgia. And I'll start off first to give you a chance to think about it.
Okay.
I think I saw the movie Field of Dreams probably 100 times between when I grew up and got my family was really into baseball. We loved Cincinnati Reds growing up and
Yeah.
watched that movie dozens of times. And I think for me, as a person who had family roots in rural communities but didn't grow up in one myself, was kind of like the lens through which I understood rural life. And I'm sure that's an incomplete one, but it's also one that I think is very interesting. And I kind of identify with the main character played by Kevin Costner, who was an urban person who goes to build a farm in the middle of a cornfield in a community he doesn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But anyways, love that movie, and it brings me. I was thinking about that a little bit during our conversation today, so I'll turn over to you. Movie or something from the 80s and 90s set in a rural community.
Yeah, it was funny. I was thinking about this. I am one of the worst pop culture people. It is a known fact about me and has been something my friends have been actively trying, and my partner have been actively trying to fix over the past many years. Like so many movies that are quoted like top 10 that I've never seen. And so I'm slowly working my way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said that over and I was like, oh boy. But I'm trying to think of yeah, I'm trying to think of one and one is honestly not coming to mind.
Look what I've done. I put you on the spot, right?
Yeah, well, I knew I was going to fail this question anyway, but um, failed ahead of time. But I will share one of the books I really loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's not set, it came out, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It's Where the Crawdads Sing. They went and made it into a movie
Yeah,
as
that's right.
well. They made it into a movie, and I could not watch the movie because it was very different from the book, and
Mm.
it was really sad at the beginning, and I don't do well with sad movies. So I immediately stopped watching it. But I really, really loved the book. And I think a lot of it was just because of there's a girl in it who is kind of left to her own devices, and just trying to grow up and live her life. And what I really loved about it was how many community members were giving her unspoken support. Like
Mm.
she wouldn't have shoes or hadn't been to school in a while, or all of these, it didn't have necessarily what she needed in terms of food. And there wasn't a huge to do about her not having these things because of how hush hush it felt to her and her family. And yet, all of these people were just doing these tiny little sweet acts that like impacted her so much throughout her entire kind of growing up to create uh to just allow her to kind of grow into what she needed to be and what she was going to be. And I feel like that just resonates a lot with like rural communities. A lot of times like things are hush hush. There were a lot of times where things were going on in your life or your family's life and I hated that everyone knew about it. It was like there was no way to kind of get around it. But at the same time, it allowed, especially when you're growing up and you maybe like have feelings around it, but at the same time, you don't feel the same shame that maybe adults do in terms of with your teachers or these people who you have that you're close to, where actually maybe them knowing a little bit more about your context helps them to like to better support you. But you didn't have to have full on like conversations about it or things that were happening. It could just kind of give you that little extra support that you needed or that little extra love or whatever it was. And so I think, yeah, I think it's kind of cool when you get to see that in other contexts.
What a great answer. I love it. You didn't fail that question at all. That was brilliant. Tied it right back too into the themes that we were talking about. I love it. Well, Cheralynn, thank you so much for your time today. We
Yeah,
appreciate all the wisdom that you've been able to share with our audience. For people who want to learn more about you, where can they do that?
absolutely. We are a local insight studio, and then my name also Cheralynn Corsack on LinkedIn. And then we also have our website, localinsightstudio.com. So you can go ahead and visit us at both of those.
Wonderful. Well, Cheralynn, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.